A lot of people are sick right now. It's a rough change of weather. Anyways, we're going to talk about the op-ed today as a model. Are you all familiar with an op-ed? Does anyone know what that is? So it is an opinion section of a newspaper. Just regular non-journalist people typically write these about their opinions, and the newspaper chooses to publish some. I'm not going to click on this again because I didn't pay the paywall and it won't let me read it. I can only open it once. But this op-ed we're going to read is from the local paper, the Lexington Herald Leader. I'm going to play, there's like a recording of this being read, and it's like AI, I think. It's not very good. And there's like an advertisement midway, so I'm sorry, but then we don't have to read it. You guys can just listen to it, and I'll scroll along. So we're going to be talking about this piece from a rhetorical analysis standpoint. So the first, we're going to break it into its kind of individual components and talk about the structure of it and kind of everything this author is doing to make a persuasive point. Once we break it into those components, we'll kind of try to use it as a model for your own work. So that's what we're doing in class today. I just say that so while you're listening to this, you can kind of note the exigence, the audience, the speaker, the structure, and we'll talk about it. Oh, it went to a different article. I'm scared if I refresh it, I might lose it. But we'll see. I'll do a private window if not.
New traffic fatality.
Excellent.
Flooding numbers demonstrate a national crisis. We must act now. I was run over by a drunk driver and almost didn't survive. When I was 13, I was on a jet ski on a lake near my home here in Kentucky when a boat driven by a drunken operator going over 60 miles an hour hit me from the side, throwing me off the jet ski. I landed face down in the water. The boat went over the jet ski and landed on top of my body. The impact broke my neck, collarbone and femurs, shattered my jaw, lacerated my liver, and left me with a severe traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma for a week. When I awoke, I discovered my right leg was severed below the knee. As devastating as that experience was, I am only one of the approximately 300,000 people injured in a drunk driving crash each year in the U.S. Tragically, traffic fatality numbers are rising. There is a public safety crisis on our roads. Traffic deaths are up for the third consecutive year. Just a quick word from our sponsor.
In this episode of Tech Between Us, I'm talking with Alan Grau, VP of Sales and
They
Business
make it
Development.
so much
PTC.
louder too.
Listen in as we discuss how engineers can make sure that devices designed to be deployed for years or even decades remain invulnerable to being hacked. Visit Mauser.com/empowering-innovation to listen to the full episode.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, just released an estimate that 9,560 people were killed in traffic crashes in the first quarter of 2022, a 7% increase over the first quarter of 2021, and the worst first quarter in 20 years, indicating that lives taken by someone's choice to drive impaired will reach the highest levels in over a decade. It's even worse in Kentucky, where NHTSA estimates a 27.2% increase in traffic fatalities during that same time period. The 7% national increase estimate in the first quarter of 2022 is in addition to the estimated 10.5% increase in overall traffic deaths in 2021 compared to 2020. Those aren't just statistics. They're people. They're family members, friends, loved ones who aren't coming home. One life lost or a person injured would be too many. 9,560 people killed in one quarter is unthinkable. Hazardous driving behaviors such as speeding, reckless, and impaired driving that got worse during the pandemic are largely to blame for the increases. It's time to respond with proven-to-work strategies, particularly fair and equitable traffic enforcement aimed directly at stopping hazardous driving. A May 2022 NHTSA synthesis of studies concluded that high visibility enforcement efforts targeting alcohol impaired driving reduced crashes or prohibited behavior in 58% of the 90 study locations. It also noted that, for preventing alcohol impaired driving, publicized sobriety checkpoints and high visibility saturation patrols have demonstrated effectiveness. Another successful model is the annual Click It or Ticket program, which has used good laws, education, and enforcement to achieve a national seatbelt use rate of 90%, saving thousands of lives a year. We need to refocus on programs and activities that worked a decade ago when on average 10,000 fewer lives were lost on U.S. roadways annually. In parallel, work must continue toward eliminating drunk driving. Thanks to the support of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, its allies, and victims and survivors of this crime, courageous bipartisan leaders in Congress included an advanced impaired driving prevention technology mandate in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was signed into law last November. It requires new equipment in cars by 2027 that will eventually save more than 9,000 lives a year. The infrastructure law also provided additional resources to be used nationally and at the state and local level for a safe systems approach to safety, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Roadway Safety Strategy that includes roadway engineering improvements that over time will complement re-emphasis on human behavior changes and safer vehicles to reduce fatalities and injuries. All these long-term steps are essential, but there's no time to lose. Fair and equitable enforcement of life-saving traffic safety laws should be our top priority.
Next article.
Despite what Republicans want to tell.
I'm not gonna talk about Joe Biden today. Great. Did you all find this to be persuasive? Just yes or no? A couple people did, okay. So let's break it down into the components, because we can learn from it whether or not we thought it was successful. What is the exigence of this op-ed?
What was that?
The problem it's trying to solve.
That would be like the crashes increasing because of like impaired drivers.
Yeah, so we're gonna put how to prevent accidents due to reckless / impaired driving. So if I rewrote this, like, how do we prevent? Is that a fruitful question? Who thinks yes? And how so?
Because you can answer it like beyond just yes or no.
Yeah.
You can have different reasons to answer that.
Yeah, definitely. And you could, like, you're not just gonna be able to answer this with a fact, right? It's not how many accidents occurred in Kentucky, it's how do we prevent this? I could argue we prevent drunk driving by putting a breathalyzer in every single car, and you can't even start your car until you blow in a breathalyzer. And someone else could argue we prevent drunk driving by putting more police checkpoints. Like, you could take different approaches to this solution and argue why you think that's a good idea. Does that make sense? So if Alex, who wrote this op-ed, was in our class and she was brainstorming her fruitful questions, this could have been one of them she wrote her ultimate research paper on. And this would have been her research paper. All right, so who is the audience? I want you all to think about where this was published to determine her audience. Yeah.
Local Kentucky.
Yep. And what makes you say that?
The newspaper is like a Kentucky newspaper, and she was saying that like she's from here and accident that happened here, and she was giving facts about accidents that happened here as well.
Great. Yeah, I just want you all to think about if this op-ed were published in the New York Times, like, would they mention that traffic fatalities have increased 7% nationwide, but they've increased by 27% in Kentucky? Maybe, but probably not, right? That's specific to our region. It's in Lexington, local paper. People are likely not reading this outside of this city, this state. Good. What about, like, who reads newspapers? Yeah.
Older people.
Yeah.
That drink.
Yeah, so it's probably more geared towards an old, just because it's in a paper, that campaign is likely towards an older demographic. I would say that a lot of lawmakers and policymakers probably are keeping up on news. Any other ideas about her audience? This is great. All right, so who is the rhetor, the speaker of this?
Oh, is it the woman?
The woman, yeah. That's right. So her name is Alex. What does she tell us about herself? What does she let us know about herself in this piece? Does someone say something? Yeah.
She was in an accident.
Yeah, so she was a victim of a drunk driving accident. How does this affect her ethos as the writer of this article, her credibility? What was it?
First-hand experience.
Yeah, so she's had this first-hand experience. Her life has really been affected by this issue. Great. So constraints. We talked about constraints can be from like the genre, so the constraints of an op-ed, and also of like the political and social climate of kind of when it's published. So this was published 2 days ago. So she wrote it really recently. What are some constraints you guys can think of about that an op-ed has, that kind of our climate today? Yeah.
I think with an op-ed, not many people read it, so like you won't reach a larger audience. Like sure you might reach, like what you were saying, lawmakers and stuff like that. But to get the message across, like, you know, the population of people who actually drive, and older people who drive, you know?
Yeah. You're making a great point about how an op-ed limits your audience, and thinking specifically about what it is about an op-ed that limits your audience. We've already talked about it's in a newspaper. People likely, we've talked about it's in a newspaper, so you know more older people read newspapers. It's in a Lexington, Kentucky newspaper, not like a major Washington Post, New York Times. Another thing newspapers have is paywalls, right? You have to pay to read this. I don't know if you guys try to read any of these papers, like they'll usually let you read like one free article a month, and beyond that you either have to like go to a private browser, or pay for a subscription. So paywall can limit this. Newspaper, just for who reads that, and yeah, so these are all constraints of this form. Do y'all have any ideas about like things? And I want to remind you all, a constraint can sound like a bad thing, like it's limiting you, but that it's not necessarily bad. So have any of you all like taken any journalism classes in high school or this first semester? Yeah. So you'll hear a lot, journalism has to be very objective and you're not supposed to like put your opinion in there. An op-ed, one of the constraints of an op-ed is that you should have an opinion. So that is a constraint of the genre, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. when it comes to being persuasive. Does that make sense? Good. So those are all kind of genre constraints that made her write this the way she did. Can you all think of anything about like the social political climate, like you know, for her audience, like kind of where she's writing this? Just think about, I'm gonna think about how these things can affect, and this, like, writing about, you know, people not driving drunk and not killing people is an idea that most people can probably get behind. But if we were to think of another issue, like, I don't know why I keep bringing up controversial stuff, but like, if someone were to write an op-ed about abortion and being like pro-choice, the political climate of where that's being published might really affect their audience more. I would argue that Kentucky has a pretty strong pro-alcohol culture, just due to the bourbon industry being so strong here. I think that if you were to go, like, one of the solutions I proposed is you just put a breathalyzer in every car, you know, the ones they give you if you get a DUI and you have to blow to even turn your car on. Like, just equip every car with those. Like, that might not go over here, because who's gonna be mad? Bar owners, distillery owners, people, you know, there are people that don't want that much limitation, that much prevention. Just bringing in my personal experience, I told you all in the beginning of class, I used to write for like a marijuana magazine because I lived in Colorado and it was legal there. And when we wrote about Kentucky, like a big reason they're saying marijuana wouldn't be legalized in Kentucky is because of how strong the alcohol lobbying industry is. And they're afraid that if you make weed legal, people will drink less and they'll make less money. So you do want to think about all of these. I mean, it's just good. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to change the way you write. You should still write your truth and write what you believe no matter what, but you might be up against more odds somewhere that has such strong alcohol industry, and so much of what people do socially here is around alcohol. Does that make sense? Do y'all have anything you want to add to these 4 kind of categories? Great. So like I said, pathos, ethos, and logos are always present in every argument. So what I want to do is break this down structurally. So that's logos, right? Looking at the structure of it. But then we can talk about how ethos and pathos is working within the structure. Do you all remember what those are? Logo, structure, ethos.
So credibility.
Credibility, yeah. And then pathos. What? Emotion. Yeah. Good. So, I know some of you didn't get to listen to this, but I'm going to show each part. So, how does the writer write, how does she make her introduction? Yeah, Olivia.
By using papers, right?
Yeah, well
Or like as a testimonial or whatever.
yeah, we don't have to, I want to talk about those terms, but we don't have to use them. I just want to
Okay.
talk about kind of like the strategies she's using throughout, so.
Oh, so maybe like grab our attention through a story that affected her and what probably led her to write this.
Yes, personal story. Good. That's her intro. What do you all think of that first sentence? Does it make you want to read more? Yeah. I really want you all to pay attention to, first sentences are so important, because that is really going to make your reader decide whether or not they're gonna continue to even listen to your argument. I think this is a effective first sentence, attention grabbing, and yeah, this is all just a personal story for her introduction. Good. And there's the writer. What is this paragraph doing?
Presenting a statistic.
Presenting a statistic, yeah. We go into a statistic. But it's connected personally, right? I am one of 300,000 people. Great. Now, these two paragraphs, what's happening here? You all do get participation points, so remember, you don't get credit for being here if you're not talking.
It's connecting your personal story to like the actual statistics of like what happens like in general, and it talks about like around the US compared to like Kentucky is really high percentage
Yeah.
of like the increase in drug drivers.
Good. So we have supporting facts. Stats. For her argument, great. And then this last paragraph, I wanna point out too, what's she doing here? Yeah, Logan.
That's like appealing to your emotions.
Yeah.
Like how like maybe you feel something, putting you in like the position of the families of people that are lost.
So taking the statistics, reconnecting it to that emotion. Good. All right. What's this paragraph? Yeah, Carlos.
She's been, or the business staying like increased like during the pandemic, like she's same like speeding, like reckless driving, her driving, they got worse.
Yeah, and so that's really showing, connecting it to a specific time, showing that how relevant the problem is. And there's also this last sentence is doing something else. What would you call this?
Call to action.
Call to action. Very good. So, establishing relevancy. I'm gonna go over to the other side of the board, but we're just mapping this out. Call to action. All right, these next two paragraphs. Really all of these. But what's happening here? What? Solutions, yes, great. Introducing, well, really it's introducing solutions. And what else? In regards to these solutions, is she doing?
Is she like also talking about like things that they have done that have like worked?
Yeah, so introducing solutions and using statistics to show they work, using facts. Very good. So that is kind of what is going down all here. What programs worked, what they're doing. What about this last? So this is her conclusion. How does she end this? Yeah, Josie.
It's like word one call to action.
Yep. Very good. Great. So you will see kind of in this intro with the personal story, she's really establishing like her ethos, her credibility on this topic. What else is used in this structure to establish ethos, establish credibility?
Sources.
The sources, yeah. The statistics, the facts, she knows her stuff, right? What is pathos, so what is used to call on our emotions? What is she using there?
Her personal story and like what happened to her.
Yeah, personal story can definitely do both of those things. And then we already mentioned this one here. Good. All right, so this, I wanted to look at this as a model. I think it's a good one. I wanted to break it down into its kind of individual components. Because I think that you guys could imitate this structure for your research paper. You don't have to, but what I'm gonna ask you to do in the next 10 minutes is to take one of your research questions and then make an outline using this same structure. So I'm gonna literally go to the first assignment I see, not in your all's class, in my other section. And I'm gonna take one of their research questions and just go through this process real quick for you all so you'll understand what I'm looking for. Because you have your next major assignment is due, that's coming up. And then after that, about 3 weeks after that, you guys are gonna have to make an outline for your final paper. So even though this work we're gonna do today, you don't have to turn it in. You could, if you like this structure and you think it works well for what you're trying to write about, you could potentially expand this outline for that major assignment. Monday, we're gonna look at a very different essay and we're gonna try to outline our same topic in that form and kind of just get ideas, just give you guys models of how you could write these papers. Great. So my first student, what are they writing about on here? Well, she didn't turn it in. Okay, so bodybuilding is what this student's writing about. Bodybuilders. Let me find one of his questions. What do steroids do for the body? What are the positives and negatives of using performance-enhancing drugs? So that's one of his potential research questions. So if he were to write this outline, poor kid, he does not use steroids, but let's pretend like he did. So if that's his major question, so his exigence is what are the positives and negatives of using performance-enhancing drugs for bodybuilders? He could start with his personal story of how it felt to use performance-enhancing drugs, what it was like to quit using them, how they affected his performance, and then he could move into the statistics, how many bodybuilders use performance-enhancing drugs, how many cases have there been of hospitalizations as a result, et cetera, et cetera. And then tying back in to pathos, a way you could do that is the way she did it, like all of these statistics are people. You could tell someone else's story, like he could say, Because he's shown me some bodybuilders who have just completely wrecked their bodies. And he could be like, take, for example, this person, here's what happened to them, right? So going from statistics back into like a story. Establishing that relevancy, so saying if it's an increasing problem, what is contributing it to being an increasing problem. Call to action, either we need to allow people to use steroids safely or we need to prevent people from using steroids. This is how we do it. Bringing in these solutions of how, whatever way he wanted to argue. Oh, we should allow people to use steroids, but they should get them from a doctor so they're safer, or they should be monitored, or we should not allow people to use steroids and we should test people every single day, you know, whatever. Introducing those solutions. If there's existing work going on with that, that's where you would cite those, what work is happening and how it's working. And then a final call to action. So for your all's outlines I want you to work on right now, I just want you to like kind of list, like introduction, here's a personal story I could tell. You don't have to write it yet. Statistics, maybe you want to start looking up some statistics. Maybe you're just thinking, naming, oh, this kind of statistic could be supportive to my argument. I'll go look for it later. Does that make sense, what you guys are working on? So yeah, again, you're not turning this in, but I told you all I would try to avoid busy work as much as possible, so this is a potential outline you could use for your final paper. We'll take 5 minutes? I meant to give you 10, but we just took too long with the discussion. We'll take 5 minutes, so we'll stop at 10:40. You can at least get these on in your notebooks to save this model. And then I'll show you the homework and we'll go home. I'll turn this on, but of course feel free to listen to your own music. I hope you all can read this. No, this is more after your artifact, like you'll make an outline for your major paper. So one of your research questions you're interested in, outline it for that.
And that one has to be the one we started.
Yeah, but this is just to brainstorm, but your artifact paper wouldn't really fit into this form.